So a lot of not great stuff happened in the early 1800s and 1900s, but eventually, thankfully, we have what's called an Institutional Review Board, or IRB, that was established in 1974. And what this is a group of people that get together and kind of have established, look over the studies and make sure things are ethical. So it's a group of people made up of scientists, but also people who are professionals, unaffiliated with the science at hand, as well as general members of the community, people who are not scientists at all. It's a wide, diverse board, and this group of people convenes, reads over your experiment you're going to do, and makes sure that certain problems are not present, that it is ethically sound. So one of the main things that we saw, throughout these examples, they make sure that participation is completely voluntary and not coerced. So the participants need to be able to opt out without fear of retribution, and not fear like any sort of benefit is going to be denied of them, things like that. They need to be able to voluntarily consent to the research. So they need to be able to have informed consent, which means that they have to know what's going to happen. You can't just walk up to someone and be like, hey, is it okay if I do a test on you? You need to be like, hey, here are the different things that I plan to do. These are the measurements I'm going to take. Are you okay with this happening? So that's why, oftentimes in this class, you're going to hopefully get to experience some research. So you'll often be given, or you should be given at the beginning, a consent form. And what this does is it walks you through, here are your rights as a subject, here are the things that are going to happen, here are the benefits, the potential harms, things like that, so that you have as clear of a picture you can get on what's going to happen so you can consent to it or not. Some studies, however, rely on the use of deception. So for instance, if I want to know whether or not you will react differently if I have, if I sit in the room as you're taking a test versus not, or if I'm trying to not tell you what's the point of the study yet, because that might influence your results. I can not tell you that on the consent form. I cannot explicitly say that, I'm there to intimidate you or I don't know, whatever. But then if that's necessary to the study, I then have to debrief you afterwards and tell you why I did that. So you're still informing people completely, but if deception is necessary for your study question, as long as it doesn't cause any other undue harm, you're allowed to not include it in your consent if you debrief afterwards. IRB also makes sure that the benefits of your study outweigh the risks. So you need to minimize your discomfort, and you can't cause irreversible harm to your subjects. So sometimes, for instance, maybe you want to test the effect of where pain is in the brain, and you need to shock someone in order to kind of find where their pain region of the brain is. You need to make sure that what you're doing, the shocks that you're giving, aren't causing any form of harm and aren't uncomfortable to the participant. This is especially evident, nowadays in this COVID research, where you have to make sure that the vaccines that are getting researched on aren't going to cause more harm than they are good. Because you need, there's a lot of negative side effects, often of different treatments and whatnot. So it's imperative that the person is not going to walk out of the study worse than they walked in. And you need to tell participants, you have to be upfront with them. You may feel a little pain here. You may have eyes tired by staring at a screen for an hour, things like that. You need to make them aware of any possible risks they may face. Also, privacy and confidentiality. A lot of studies reveal or involve collecting some personal information. Things like your socioeconomic status, different demographics, even just things like your health, physiological measurements. Maybe there's some sensitive information you revealed in a survey. You need to keep that information confidential and private. You're not allowed to publicize that information. You need to respect your people. So that's one thing that the IRB makes sure is true. And then lastly, as we kind of mentioned before, debriefing your participants. So regardless of whether there's deception or not, telling participants why you did the study that you did, and kind of telling them, kind of letting them learn through the process is also important. So not just collecting data for your own good and letting them go, but making sure that we treat them as real people and tell them why we're doing the things we're doing. So treating people as people with dignity is important. And so your IRB gets together and makes sure that your study aligns with these particular ideals. So hopefully we should never have these types of racial coercion types of experiments that happened in the early 1900s. So this is the kind of ethical research that happens on humans. I have a brief slide on animal research as well. So there's a similar kind of review board that makes sure studies on animals are also ethical. Oof. So they have to have a clear purpose. You can't just randomly want to test on animals. You need to, again, minimize the pain and suffering experienced. Benefits should outweigh the harms. And the standards of your study need to approximately be similar standards to local humane societies. You can't do anything as far as, like, you know, disposing of animals or treating animals with food and water, those kind of things. General caretaking of the animals should be comparable to what those animals experience in local humane societies. So kind of things to remember this with are the 3 R's: replace, reduce, and refine. So with replace, if you can, when all possible, replace an animal study with some other method that doesn't need to involve animals. So only use animals when necessary or crucial. Reduce, so use as few animals as possible, as many trials as you can. Wait, I said that backwards. As few animals as possible and as few trials as you need. So that way, if you're doing any sort of difficult thing with the animal or any sort of pain or suffering that they have to go through, you do it as minimum number of times as they have to. So reducing trials, reducing the number of animals that you need to use. And then lastly, refine. So minimizing stress of the animals. So kind of refining your study to make sure that you're doing as minimally invasive things as you need to do, and just kind of making sure everything you do is intentional and has a clear purpose. So that kind of wraps up all of the content of this lecture. Hopefully now, when you see these kind of media headlines, you're able to investigate, look at the type of method these studies used, look at what the results actually were compared to what the claim is being made, if they're saying something causes cancer, but in actuality, they just correlated the 2 measures, things like that. So look at these studies, these clickbaity headlines, with a little bit more healthy skepticism. So if you have any sort of ethical red flags, like this attractiveness study that didn't obtain consent from the women, you'll get to approach these headlines with a little bit more scientific, critical of a mindset. So that rounds out our research methods lecture. Kudos for sticking through if you got to the very end here. Happily we'll take questions. So I think the way that this is going to work is I'll post a discussion board for this particular lecture. So if there's anything in this lecture that you were confused about or have additional questions on, throw them on that discussion board. And this is not to be intimidating in any way. You don't need to respond to people, that kind of thing. But it's an organized way for me to kind of to figure out where the weaker points are, so that when we meet synchronously, I can better prepare to help you and to figure out what I should go over again and what I should, clarify. So feel free to post on the discussion board. And also, I'm open to feedback. This is the first time I've done a pre-recorded lecture. So, maybe we'll give it a few more tries, but if there's anything about this that I can improve, feel free to reach out. Maybe I'll post a feedback form or whatnot. So let me know how this goes, guys. I can't imagine having to learn on the other side of the screen. So I'm here for you. I'm an open book. I'm flexible. Let me help out what's going to be best for you. Okay. So you got this. Hopefully that was somewhat entertaining. That's what I have. So bye, guys.